Alara Vance adjusted her audio monitors for the fifth time that hour. The persistent whisper dancing at the edge of her perception was driving her mad. Not because it was loud, quite the opposite. It was so faint, so elusive that she questioned whether it existed at all. But her hyperacute hearing never lied. "Come on," she muttered to herself, fine-tuning the deep space audio receiver. "I know you're there." The isolated Kepler 186F station hummed with the quiet efficiency of human technology, pushing the boundaries of space exploration. Most of the 27 crew members were asleep at this hour, leaving Alara alone in the sound lab, where she felt most comfortable. As the station's audio technician, her official duties involved maintaining communication systems and analyzing cosmic background noise for research purposes. Unofficially, she spent increasing amounts of time pursuing the whispers that no one else seemed to hear. Her colleagues had long since written off her claims. Medical staff diagnosed tinnitus or stress-induced auditory hallucinations. Dr. Parks, the station psychologist, suggested her isolation from other crew members might be causing her brain to create phantom sounds for company. Auditory pareidolia, he'd explained kindly during her last mandatory psychological evaluation. The human brain is wired to find patterns in randomness, especially in sound. It's why people hear words in white noise or music play backward. But Alara knew better. The whispers had structure, complexity, rhythm. They appeared in predictable patterns, sometimes responding to environmental changes in the station. They weren't random, and they certainly weren't coming from inside her head. She checked the time, 0247 hours. The station would remain in minimal activity mode for another 4 hours. Perfect for what she had planned. Alara transferred her latest recordings to her personal tablet and quietly made her way to Module C7, a small acoustic testing chamber she'd gradually modified over the past 3 months. The room was designed to be perfectly soundproof for calibrating sensitive audio equipment, but she'd repurposed it for her own research. Once inside, she sealed the heavy door, engaged her custom electromagnetic field dampeners, and placed her modified audio processors at key points around the room. The complete silence was immediate and absolute, a vacuum of sound that most people found disturbing. Alara found it clarifying. She sat cross-legged in the center of the room, closed her eyes, and focused. The specially designed neural audio interface she'd created allowed her to filter and amplify precisely the frequencies that contained the whispers. It was unauthorized equipment modification, certainly against regulations, but she was beyond caring about rules at this point. The whispers came almost immediately, stronger than ever in this carefully prepared environment. "I know you're there," she whispered aloud this time, keeping her voice just above the threshold of audibility. "I can't hear you." 23 light years from Earth, in a dimension slightly out of phase with conventional reality, the being designated observer, whisper, 3291 froze in alarm. The human had spoken directly to them. Not just noticed the residual sound wave manipulations that were an unavoidable byproduct of Sileni presence, but had deliberately addressed them. This was unprecedented in 47,000 years of covert observation. Observer, whisper, 3291 immediately sent a subtle vibration alert to the other 11 members of the Kepler 186F observation cluster. Within milliseconds, their consciousness merged in the shared thought field that served as their primary communication medium. "This cannot be happening," senior observer, whisper, 9844 pulsed into the collective. "Our phase-shifting technology and sonic masking fields are perfect. No three-dimensional species has ever detected us." Yet the human female addressed us directly. "Observer, whisper," 3291 countered. "She has modified her environment and technology specifically to enhance detection of our presence. She cannot truly hear us." Observation leader, whisper, 4767 asserted. "She has merely detected anomalous patterns in background vibrations. Its statistical probability, one human among billions with hearing sensitivity at precisely the right threshold, combined with technological amplification and an unusually persistent nature." Whether she truly hears us or merely detects our effects is irrelevant. Observer, whisper, 7156 interjected. The fact remains, our presence has been compromised. Protocol demands immediate withdrawal from this observation post. The collective vibrated with disagreement, splitting into two distinct frequency patterns. Withdrawal accomplishes nothing. Observer, whisper, 3291 argued. The human has already gathered extensive data. Others will eventually validate her findings. Then we must ensure they cannot. Observer, whisper, 7156. Countered darkly. Selective interference with her equipment, induced auditory confusion patterns, perhaps even targeted molecular disruption of her auditory mechanisms. We are observers, not destroyers. Observation leader, whisper, 4767 interrupted sharply. We have maintained our prime directive of non-interference across 17 galaxies for millions of your Earth years. We will not abandon it now over a single anomalous human. Then what do you propose, leader? Senior observer, whisper, 9844 asked. Intensify sonic masking. Shift our phase variance by an additional 0.03 degrees and maintain observation. The human cannot truly comprehend our nature. At worst, she will document an unexplained phenomenon. The collective consensus vibrated in reluctant agreement, though a distinct dissonance lingered from observer, whisper, 7156, and two others who shared their concerns. None of them recognized this moment for what it truly was, the beginning of the end of their invisibility. 2 days later, Alara sat in the station's main cafeteria, exhaustion evident in the dark circles under her eyes. She'd barely slept, spending every off-duty hour in the acoustic chamber trying to establish consistent communication with whatever or whoever was whispering at the edges of perception. "You look like hell, warmed over," a deep voice observed as a tray clattered onto the table across from her. Alara looked up to find Dr. Eris Thorne watching her with his characteristic blend of academic curiosity and personal concern. As the station's xenolinguist, his job was to develop theoretical frameworks for potential alien communication, work that many considered completely theoretical in nature. "Thanks for the precision diagnosis, Doctor," she replied with a tired smile. "Is that your professional medical opinion?" "Professional linguistic observation," he corrected, his face crinkling with amusement that brought out the gray in his beard. "The bags under your eyes are speaking volumes in a language universally understood as, 'I'm pushing myself too hard.'" Alara liked Dr. Thorne. Unlike most of the scientific staff who treated her as merely technical support, he engaged with her as an intellectual equal, perhaps because they both occupied professional niches that others viewed with skepticism. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then reconsidered. If anyone might listen without immediate dismissal, it would be him. "Actually, have you ever wondered if we might be missing something? Something right in front of us, or rather, all around us?" Thorne tilted his head slightly. "In what sense?" Alara hesitated, then decided to risk it. "What if there were intelligent entities that exist outside our normal perceptual range? Not necessarily physically invisible, but operating on frequencies or in dimensional spaces that humans typically can't detect." Instead of the dismissive chuckle she half expected, Thorne considered her question seriously. "It's not an unreasonable hypothesis. Human senses capture an infinitesimal fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. Our auditory range is particularly limited." He took a bite of his synthetic protein breakfast and chewed thoughtfully. "The universe has had billions of years to develop intelligence. It would be the height of anthropocentric arrogance to assume all intelligent life would evolve to operate within our narrow band of perception." Alara felt a surge of cautious hope. "What if I told you I think I've detected something like that? Here on the station." Thorne's eyebrows rose slightly, but his expression remained carefully neutral. "I'd say that's an extraordinary claim that would require extraordinary evidence. I have recordings," she said quietly. "Not conclusive on their own, but when analyzed properly, They show consistent patterns that can't be explained by random noise or equipment malfunction. May I hear them? It's better to experience them in the right environment. I've modified one of the acoustic testing chambers to... She was interrupted by a sudden, piercing squeal from the cafeteria's announcement system, causing everyone to wince and cover their ears. After a few seconds of painful feedback, the system corrected itself. "Attention, all personnel," the automated voice announced. "Minor environmental control fluctuation detected. System self-corrected. No action required." As the announcement ended, Alara noticed something odd. The feedback hadn't been random. It had contained micro-patterns, almost like a digital fingerprint. The same patterns she'd been tracking in her recordings. Across the room, Communications Officer Lynn dropped her mug, which shattered on the floor. "That's the third malfunction this week," she complained as she knelt to clean up the mess. "Engineering needs to get their act together." Dr. Thorne turned back to Alara, seemingly ready to dismiss the interruption, but stopped when he saw her expression. "What is it?" "That wasn't a malfunction," she whispered. "It was them. Meet me in Acoustic Chamber C7 at 2,200 hours tonight. I'll show you." The Sileni observation cluster was in disarray. Their attempt to disrupt the communication systems near Alara had backfired spectacularly, creating a more noticeable anomaly rather than a subtle distraction. "We are making the situation worse," Observer Whisper 3291 argued. "Each interference attempt leaves more evidence for her to collect. The solution is simple," Observer Whisper 7156 insisted. "We must discredit her. Create auditory anomalies when she is in public settings, but not when she is alone with recording equipment. Her colleagues will conclude she suffers from mental instability. That violates our non-interference principles." Observer Whisper 3291 objected. "We have already interfered by being detected," Observer Whisper 7156 countered. "Damage control is now unnecessary." The division within the cluster grew more pronounced, with 5 observers now aligned with Observer Whisper 7150 SXS more aggressive approach, while 4 supported Observer Whisper 3291's caution. The remaining 3, including their leader, remained undecided. "I propose a middle path," Observation Leader Whisper 4767 finally announced. "We will gradually increase sonic masking and phase variance to maximum levels. If the human can still detect us, we will reassess." Both factions reluctantly agreed, though neither was fully satisfied. What none acknowledged was that a fundamental shift had occurred. For the first time in millennia, the Sileni were reacting to another species rather than merely observing. And deep in the dimensional layers that composed their being, an emotion they had long evolved beyond began to resurface: fear. That night, as Alara guided Dr. Thorne through the specialized equipment in her modified acoustic chamber, she felt a curious mix of anxiety and relief. Finally, someone would either validate her experiences or provide a rational explanation that would put her mind at ease. "This is impressive," Thorne admitted, examining her custom neural audio interface. "Though I'm fairly certain it violates at least a dozen station regulations on equipment modification." 17. "Actually," Alara replied with a ghost of a smile. "I counted." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "And you're willing to risk your position here for this? Wouldn't you? If you thought you might be the first human to detect an entirely new form of intelligence." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "Fair point. So how does this work?" For the next 20 minutes, Alara walked him through her setup, explaining how she'd modified standard audio processors to detect and amplify frequencies that normally fell well below or above human hearing range, then used specialized algorithms to identify non-random patterns within what appear to be ambient noise. "The patterns appear in multiple frequency ranges simultaneously," she explained, displaying a 3-dimensional spectral analysis on her tablet. "They're too complex and consistent to be natural phenomena, and they change in response to environmental stimuli, specifically to human activity." Thorne studied the patterns, his academic skepticism visibly wrestling with professional curiosity. It's compelling, but still not conclusive. Pattern recognition can be notoriously susceptible to confirmation bias. I know, Ilera acknowledged. That's why I've prepared a test. She handed him a set of neural audio sensors. Put these on. They'll connect you directly to the frequency ranges where I've been detecting the patterns. Once they were both connected to the system, Ilera engaged the complete sound-dampening field she'd installed. The room became a void of absolute silence. "Now watch," she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the perfect stillness. She initiated a simple program on her tablet that generated a sequence of prime numbers as subtle vibrations. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Then she waited, perfectly still, focused entirely on the subtle vibrations around them. For nearly 2 minutes, nothing happened. Thorne shifted uncomfortably, clearly beginning to doubt. Then it came, so faint that even Ilera almost missed it. A response, 17, 19, 23. Thorne's eyes widened. He looked at Ilera, then back at the monitoring equipment, which had registered the response across multiple frequency bands. "That wasn't generated by your system," he said slowly. "No, it wasn't random. It was the next 3 prime numbers in sequence. Could be feedback, some kind of system echo. I've ruled that out through multiple tests. Whatever is responding is autonomous and intelligent." Thorne was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. "We need to..." He was cut off by a sudden cacophony of sound erupting from all around them. Alarms, voices, mechanical noises, all blaring at maximum volume despite the rooms. Soundproofing. Both of them ripped off their audio sensors in pain. As suddenly as it began, the noise stopped, leaving them in silence again. "What the hell was that?" Thorne gasped. Ilera's expression was grim. "I think that was a warning. Or a threat." In the dimensional space occupied by the Sileni, Observer, Whisper, 3291 was being severely reprimanded. "You responded directly to the mathematical sequence. Observer, Whisper, 7156 accused, their vibrational pattern harsh with condemnation. You have violated our most sacred protocol. It was unintentional." Observer, Whisper, 3291 defended. The mathematical pattern created a resonance field that triggered an automatic response. I couldn't prevent it. Regardless of intent, the damage is done. Observation Leader, Whisper, 4767 stated gravely. The humans now have confirmation of intelligent interaction. Observer, Whisper, 3291, you are relieved of duty pending full evaluation. As Observer Whisper, 3291's consciousness was partially disconnected from the cluster. Observer, Whisper, 7156 moved quickly to consolidate support. "We have no choice now but to implement more aggressive countermeasures," they insisted. "The male human is a particular threat. His linguistic expertise, combined with the female's auditory capabilities, could lead to a functional communication channel. What do you propose?" Senior Observer, Whisper, 9844 asked, now aligned with Observer Whisper 7150 SIXS faction. "We must create overwhelming auditory disturbances whenever they attempt communication. We must introduce subtle malfunctions in their audio equipment. And we must ensure that any patterns they detect appear random and meaningless to others." "And if that fails?" asked another observer. Observer Whisper 7150 SXS response came with cold precision. "Then we escalate to more direct methods of disruption. The integrity of our observational mission supersedes the well-being of 2 humans." The majority of the cluster reluctantly consented to this approach, their collective fear of exposure overriding their traditional non-interference principles. Only 3 observers, now cut off from the main cluster's decisions, maintained their opposition, watching in dismay as their colleagues prepared to actively harm the very beings they had been tasked with peacefully observing. Over the next week, Ilera and Dr. Thorne worked in furtive collaboration, meeting in the acoustic chamber during off hours and communicating via encrypted messages the rest of the time. The strange audio disruptions had continued, growing more frequent and targeted. Alara's personal quarters had become a nightmare of random sounds. Equipment alarms at 3 a.m., garbled voices speaking nonsense through her communication panel, even her shower cycling between scalding and freezing with accompanying high-pitched whines. Her sleep was constantly interrupted, and her concentration during work hours suffered. Dr. Thorne experienced similar disruptions, though less severe. His linguistic database repeatedly corrupted in specific ways, replacing normal terms with nonsensical phonetic patterns. His audio recordings of rare Earth languages, valuable research he'd brought with him to the station, developed strange overlays that rendered them unusable. "They're trying to wear us down," Alara observed as they met in the acoustic chamber, which remained their only reliable sanctuary. The disruptions always target communication systems or audio equipment. Or sleep, Thorne added wearily, looking nearly as exhausted as Alara. Classic psychological warfare tactics. Despite the harassment, they had made progress. Thorne had adapted his xenolinguistic analysis programs to catalog the patterns in the whispers, identifying structural elements that suggested a complex grammar. "It's not just mathematics," he explained, showing Alara his findings. "There are recurring patterns that appear to function as modal operators, essentially defining how other elements should be interpreted, similar to how tense works in human languages, but more complex. Can we use this to communicate with them?" Alara asked. "Possibly. I've developed a basic framework for a rudimentary exchange, using mathematical sequences as an anchor point and these modal patterns to construct simple concepts." They worked through the night, building a communication system that combined Alara's audio interface with Thorne's linguistic framework. By morning, they were ready to attempt direct contact. "We should establish some basic parameters first," Thorne cautioned. "What exactly do we want to say, and what are we hoping to learn?" Alara considered the question carefully. "I think we need to acknowledge them directly, let them know we're aware of their presence. Then perhaps ask about their nature and purpose. And if they respond aggressively, then at least we'll know where we stand," she replied grimly. They initiated their communication program, sending out a carefully structured sequence of vibrations across multiple frequency bands. The message was simple in concept, but complex in execution. "We perceive you. We wish to understand. We intend no harm." For several minutes, there was no response. Then, suddenly, all their equipment shut down simultaneously, despite being on independent power circuits. In the absolute darkness that followed, a whisper manifested directly beside Alara's ear, not through the equipment, but somehow physically present in the room. "You should not exist as you are." Thorne's sharp intake of breath suggested he had heard it too. Before either could respond, the lights and equipment came back online as if nothing had happened. "Did you?" Alara began. "Yes," Thorne confirmed, his voice steady despite the pallor of his face. "Word for word, the same message. That wasn't transmitted through any medium I can detect," Alara said, checking her equipment. "It was as if they generated the sound directly in the air beside us, which suggests capabilities far beyond what we've theorized." Thorne typed rapidly on his tablet. "We need to try again, but we should—" A sharp crack interrupted him as his tablet split in half, the screen shattering into a perfect geometric pattern. At the same moment, Alara felt a pressure in her ears, a painful squeezing that made her gasp. "We need to stop," she managed through gritted teeth. "They're escalating." The pressure in her ears suddenly released. In its place came a different whisper, this one somehow gentler, though no less alien. "Not all of us wish you harm." Meanwhile, in the Selene-dimensional space, open conflict had erupted within the observation cluster. You directly manifested sonic vibrations in their physical environment. Observer, whisper, 3291 accused observer, whisper, 7156. You violated every principle of non-interference we hold sacred. The situation demanded decisive action. Observer, whisper, 7156 responded coldly. Their attempt at structured communication crossed the final threshold. and your response has only confirmed their suspicions and accelerated their efforts. Observer, Whisper, 3291 countered. They now know with certainty that we exist and can interact with their physical environment. Enough. Observation Leader, Whisper, 4767 intervened. This discord threatens the integrity of our entire observation network. I'm contacting the High Council for guidance. The High Council is light years away. Observer, Whisper, 7156 objected. By the time they respond, these humans could expose our presence to their entire species. That does not justify abandoning our core principles. Observer, Whisper, 3291 insisted. These humans have shown intelligence and restraint. They seek understanding, not exploitation. They may be worthy of contact. Heresy. Several observers vibrated in unison. Truth, countered Observer, Whisper, 3291, joined by two others. We have observed humanity for centuries. Yes, they are violent, territorial, often irrational, but also capable of profound insight, remarkable adaptation, and genuine compassion. They're not so different from what we once were. This discussion is ended. Observer, Whisper, 7156 declared. The majority has decided. We will implement comprehensive countermeasures to neutralize this threat permanently. Before Leader, Whisper, 4767 could intervene. Observer, Whisper, 7156, and their supporters shifted to a private frequency band, effectively splitting the cluster in two. In that moment, Observer, Whisper, 3291 made a decision that would forever change two species. Breaking protocol completely, they established a direct, narrowband connection to Alera's neural audio interface and transmitted a simple message. Danger. Main communication array. 3 hours. Back in the acoustic chamber, Alera gasped as the message manifested directly in her consciousness. Not as sound, but as pure understanding. What is it? Thorn asked, alarmed by her reaction. They're going to do something to the main communication array, she said urgently. In 3 hours. Something dangerous. How do you know? I just received it. Not through the equipment. Directly in my mind. She looked at him, eyes wide with realization. I think we're dealing with two different factions. One wants to silence us. The other is trying to warn us. Thorn checked the time. 3 hours puts us right in the middle of the weekly data transmission to Earth. If they disrupt that, it would isolate the station completely, Alera finished, and give them free rein to deal with us however they want. They quickly gathered their essential equipment and hurried toward the station's central communications hub. Along the way, they noticed increasing technical glitches throughout the station. Lights flickering, door mechanisms stuttering, temperature regulators cycling erratically. It's starting already, Alera observed grimly. They're setting the stage to make whatever they're planning look like a cascade of technical failures. When they reached the communications center, they found a team of technicians already troubleshooting various minor malfunctions. Systems are going haywire, Chief Communications Officer Reyes told them, looking harried. And of course, it happens right before our scheduled transmission window. We think we know what's causing it, Alera said, then hesitated, realizing how their explanation would sound. Thorn stepped in smoothly. We've been tracking unusual frequency patterns that suggest external interference. May we connect some specialized equipment to help isolate the source? Reyes looked skeptical, but too busy to argue. If you can fix whatever's causing this mess, be my guest. Just stay out of the way of my team. They quickly set up their equipment near the main array controls, connecting Alera's neural audio interface to the station's primary communication systems. What exactly are we trying to do? Thorn whispered as they worked. I'm not sure, Alera admitted, but I think our friendly faction might be able to help us counter whatever the others are planning. As the scheduled transmission time approached, the technical issues intensified. Communications panels began to fail completely, and the primary array started showing signs of severe power fluctuations. This is beyond normal malfunction, Reyes said, growing increasingly alarmed. It's like something is directly manipulating our systems at the quantum level. 30 seconds to transmission window, announced the technician. Alara could feel it now. A building pressure, a gathering of forces beyond normal human perception. Through her neural interface, she detected massive energy concentrations forming around the primary array's most sensitive components. They're going to overload the entire system, she realized aloud. The feedback could fry every communication circuit on the station. With no time to explain and no conventional way to counter the attack, Alara made a desperate decision. She fully engaged her neural interface, opened all frequency channels simultaneously, and projected a single, powerful thought. We know you're there. We know you're divided. We seek harmony, not conflict. Show yourselves to all, not just to us. She then routed this message through the station's internal announcement system, broadcasting it not as a thought, but as a structured series of harmonic frequencies, audible to everyone, human and Sileni alike. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the station, crew members stopped what they were doing, struck by the strange, compelling harmonics that seemed to resonate on a cellular level. More importantly, the building energy around the communication array suddenly dispersed. In the dimensional space of the Sileni, Observer, Whisper, 3291, and their allies seized the moment. They amplified Alara's harmonics, adding layers of meaning that transformed the simple message into a complex revelation, exposing Observer Whisper 7150 SXS plan attack and the philosophical schism it represented. This combined harmonic revelation spread instantaneously through the entire Sileni observation network, reaching far beyond the Kepler 186F cluster to thousands of other observation points throughout the galaxy. What had been a local dispute suddenly became a species-wide ethical crisis. On the station, humans experienced this moment as a strange, suspended second of universal clarity, a feeling that they were suddenly part of something vastly larger than themselves. Then, as quickly as it had come, the sensation faded, leaving behind a residual awareness that something profound had changed. In the communication center, the systems suddenly stabilized completely. The transmission to Earth proceeded flawlessly, sending not just the scheduled scientific data, but also, unknown to the human operators, a subtle encoded message embedded by Observer. Whisper 3291, the first official greeting from one species to another. 3 weeks later, Kepler 186F station buzzed with unprecedented activity. What had been a relatively obscure research outpost had become the focal point of humanity's first confirmed contact with an alien intelligence. The station had received 3 supply shuttles carrying specialized equipment and a dozen new personnel, linguists, physicists, and xenobiologists eager to study the phenomenon that most were now calling the Whispers. In a newly designated contact lab that had once been Acoustic Chamber C7, Alara adjusted her neural interface, while a team of scientists monitored dozens of instruments designed to detect the subtle presence of the Sileni. Ready for today's exchange? Dr. Thorne asked, looking up from his linguistic analysis console. As ready as I'll ever be, Alara replied with a smile that reflected both exhaustion and exhilaration. Since the dramatic events in the communications center, contact with the Sileni had been formalized and expanded. Observer, Whisper, 3291, now designated by the humans as first voice for simplicity, had become their primary contact, representing the progressive faction that had prevailed in the Sileni's internal conflict. The High Council of the Sileni had made a historic decision. After millions of years of covert observation, they would engage in limited, careful communication with humanity, beginning with the crew of Kepler 186F station, and specifically through Alara, whose unique auditory capabilities made her the ideal intermediary. Observer, Whisper 7156, and the Hardline faction had been recalled and reassigned to non-contact duties, though the humans were assured that the philosophical debate within Sileni society continued vigorously. Today's scheduled exchange would be the most ambitious yet, an attempt to share complex concepts about the Sileni's nature and history. As the appointed time arrived, Ilera activated the full range of her interface and opened her mind to the now familiar presence. "We acknowledge your presence, First Voice," she said softly, using the formal greeting protocol they had established. The response came not as words, but as a complex harmonic pattern that Ilera's mind translated into concepts. "We acknowledge your receptivity, Ilera Vance, sound bridge between realms." The title still made her smile. The Sileni had difficulty with human names, but understood roles and functions perfectly, hence the elaborate designation they'd given her. "We are prepared to receive your historical narrative," she continued, following the protocol. What followed was unlike any communication she had previously experienced, a symphony of harmonics, subfrequencies, and dimensional resonances that her enhanced perception translated into a vivid understanding of the Sileni's evolution. They had once been physical beings, she learned, not unlike humans, but on a different evolutionary path. Over millions of years, they had gradually transcended their physical limitations, learning to exist primarily as patterns of energy and vibration that could move freely through multiple dimensions. Their society had evolved around principles of observation and understanding rather than conquest or expansion. They had watched countless civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, never interfering, only learning. Until now, as the exchange concluded, Ilera felt the familiar mental fatigue that accompanied these sessions. Thorn handed her a cup of water, which she gratefully accepted. "How much did the instruments capture?" she asked the research team. "About 40% of the total information transfer," replied Dr. Kellerman, the quantum physicist who headed the technical team. "We're getting better at detecting the higher frequencies, but the dimensional aspects still elude our equipment." "That's why you remain essential," Thorn told Ilera. "Your brain somehow processes what our technology cannot." Ilera nodded, too tired to explain again that it wasn't just her auditory capabilities, but something deeper, a resonance between her consciousness and the Sileni that had developed through their interactions. As the research team processed the new data, Ilera stepped away for a moment of quiet reflection. She moved to the observation dome, a transparent section of the station that offered an unobstructed view of the star field surrounding Kepler 186F. As she gazed at the distant stars, a gentle whisper manifested beside her, not through her neural interface, but directly in the air. "You have changed us," First Voice said, their presence a subtle distortion in the light rather than a physical form. "For the first time in a million years, we debate our purpose. Many now question whether observation alone is enough." "And what do you think?" Ilera asked softly. "I think that true understanding comes only through exchange, not observation. You have taught us that, and you've taught us that we've never been truly alone in the universe," she replied. "That changes everything about how we see ourselves." "Indeed, there is fear among both our kinds about where this path leads. Change always brings uncertainty, but also possibility," Ilera added. "Yes, possibility." The presence seemed to shift slightly, the light patterns becoming more complex. "Your transmission to Earth contained our greeting. Soon, more humans will know of us. Are you prepared for what follows?" Ilera considered the question seriously. The revelation of the Sileni's existence would transform human society in ways impossible to predict. There would be fear, wonder, religious upheaval, philosophical revolution. Nothing would be quite the same again. "I don't think anyone can be fully prepared for that kind of change," she admitted. "But I believe it's necessary. Understanding that we share the universe with others like you, it might help us grow beyond our limitations. As it may help us grow beyond ours," First Voice acknowledged. "Our long isolation has brought wisdom, but also stagnation. Perhaps this is why the universe arranged our meeting." "You believe it was arranged?" "I believe that patterns of such perfect resonance, your unique abilities, my species' presence, this moment in your civilization's development, suggest more than random chance. Though whether by design or emergent complexity, I cannot say." The presence began to fade, the whispering voice growing fainter. Rest now, Soundbridge. Tomorrow we continue building understanding between our kinds. As First Voice disappeared completely, Alara remained at the observation dome, watching the stars with new awareness. Somewhere out there, countless other intelligences might be watching, waiting, whispering. And now, humanity was learning to listen. In her quarters that night, Alara made a final entry in the personal log she'd been keeping since the first contact. "The universe is alive with whispers," she wrote. "We just needed to learn how to hear them. Perhaps that's all any of us truly needs, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be understood across the great silence between minds. Not so different, after all." She closed the log and prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new harmonies, new challenges, new understanding. The whispers that had once driven her to the edge of doubt now guided her toward a future where humanity would never again believe itself alone in the cosmos. And somewhere in the dimensional layers beyond human perception, the Sileni were learning that being seen, being heard, wasn't something to fear after all. It was something to embrace.